Some of the key dates of the Knicks schedule have started coming out, and it seems pretty obvious what the league thinks is the marquee matchup in the East this year. Let's talk about it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On Knicks, going to break down some of the early dates, the early big dates that have been released out of the Knicks schedule. So we'll talk about the opening night game, the Christmas Day game, and the MLK Day game, all of which have been announced already, with more coming later this week. And then we'll talk about the Knicks coaching staff a little bit and some of the updates that have come out over the last week and change to who's on the Knicks coaching staff. And then close with the last bit of Gavin's conversation with Danny Cunningham from Locked On Cavs yesterday, which, spoiler, is pretty relevant considering who the Knicks are playing in a couple of these marquee matchups this season. So we'll get into all that in just a moment. But first, I want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day. Whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube, we appreciate you making this part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit the auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. All right, so let's talk about this early schedule here. So 3 games have been announced to this particular moment that I'm recording this in the Knicks schedule. Their first game, October 22nd versus the Cavaliers. So they are not on the first night of the season. They will be on the second night of the season. It's all West Coast teams, or Western Conference teams anyway, in the first night of the season for the NBA this year. But Knicks-Cavs, first matchup of the second day of the season. On October 22nd. It also seems like the NBA is definitely going all in on having multiple somewhat opening days this first week, where they're going to have a lot of different days with just like a couple games on them, probably to satisfy all of the many streaming partners that they have partnered up with on this new TV deal. This is, of course, the first year where NBC is back, where Prime Video is going to be carrying some NBA games this year. ESPN is still on board, and ABC naturally. Local networks are going to have less and less, so that's why James Dolan is mad that we don't get to see Mike Breen and Clyde as much anymore, and he doesn't get to make as much money. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the schedule shakes down the rest of the way out, considering all of these various obligations the NBA now has to all these different streaming partners. But the Knicks face the Cavs, first game of the season for them, on October 22nd, and at home versus the Cavs. Seems like a good matchup. I think that given injury circumstances, I think the easy money here would have been the Celtics or the Pacers if either of those teams were at full strength. But obviously with the injuries to Tatum and Halliburton, that seems less appealing. It seems like less of the title fight vibes that clearly the NBA are going for here with this opening matchup of let's get the 2 best teams in the conference going against each other. Not the theoretical 2 best teams, which unfortunately Boston and Indy are for probably the whole year, just because I figure Tatum and Halliburton should be out the entire season, given when each of them were injured. So yeah, interesting choice. I probably would have gone with Detroit here. Here I am giving Detroit credit after, in general, not being thrilled with them throughout the playoff series, and the overall, what they were able to get away with versus what the Knicks were able to get away with foul wise and all that stuff during that series. But, I think that was the more compelling matchup here. If you were going to pick one of the Knicks opponents from last year, the Knicks Cavs just didn't really have any sauce last year because they didn't meet in the playoffs at all. And that now feels like a small eternity ago, the series 3 postseasons ago. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess that was 4 postseasons ago now. That's crazy. Um, but yeah, I kind of lean towards maybe wanting to do the Pistons instead, but I get it with the Cavs. It seems obvious that they just kind of view this as like the 1-2 matchup, because it was the 1-2 matchup this past season, or it was, or close to it anyway. The Knicks, obviously they had to upset the Celtics, but it's, I think that just given where the Knicks finished last year versus where they figure to finish this year, it probably is the 1-2 matchup again, unless Detroit makes a huge jump, unless Orlando makes a huge jump. So I get it, lead with your best foot, I guess, for the first game of the season. But then we have the Knicks and the Cavs again on Christmas Day. So I a little confused here as to why they ultimately are doing the Cavs twice. I don't know. That feels a little gratuitous. You would think that, maybe for the first game you want the presumptive two best teams in the conference, but Christmas Day is usually sort of like a grudge match, or like a, ironically, like the day when everyone's trying to be happy and give each other presents or whatever, usually features some kind of contentious NBA matchups. Not the case this year. Although, I mean, I guess you could say the Knicks and Cavs is still contentious. I'm not gonna lie, maybe there's a small part of me too that just doesn't want this many marquee matchups against the Cavs, because the Knicks just did not play the Cavs well during the regular season last year at all. So all these national stage games, the big national stage games, and now looks like the Knicks are going to be facing a team that frankly embarrassed them almost every time last year during the regular season. But you hope that with Mike Brown on board and with a year of tape on the new Cavs, that under Kenny Atkinson, that maybe the Knicks can come out with a little better game plan than what they had last year, which they just kind of got run off the floor against the Cavs. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that they have a little bit better of a plan than what they came out with last year, because now they're gonna have to face these guys twice in big matchups this season. So that's a little scary, not gonna lie. And then we have the Martin Luther King Day game was also announced. That's versus the Mavs this year. So that's another interesting choice. Also at 5 p.m. on NBC. So typically the Knicks have always had a MLK Day matinee, typically aired on MSG. That'll usually be an MSG game that Clyde and Breen will be on, and Clyde gives all of his stories about growing up during the civil rights movement and what it was like as a player and everything else. And honestly, I think that's my biggest thing that through these first 3 games struck me is, oh, no more Clyde on MLK Day. And I guess we should probably get used to less Clyde in general. So I think it's I mean, maybe that'll end up in a weird way working better for extending Clyde's career, although MSG seems fine with giving him as much time off as he wants. But um yeah, a little sad about that one. I'm not gonna lie, that the MLK Day matinee is no more, and then which used to always be fun to just like flip on at work, or if I wasn't off, or if I was off, just turn that on at home and get to watch that. And hearing Clyde give all those stories and everything, it was just, I don't know, it always made the day feel a little more impactful. So it's just that I feel like it's not going to quite feel the same unless maybe they bring Clyde on as a special contributor that day or something. I don't know. Who knows what the NBC uh way of doing things is going to be, because we haven't seen NBC do basketball for 30 years now or something. So yeah, well, I guess we'll see, but it's a little bit of a bummer. No MSG MLK Day matinee, but that's all we know about the schedule so far. So the full schedule will come out, I think, later this week. Gavin and I will probably come back early next week with our annual schedule breakdown, where we highlight some key matchups and key stretches of the season and all that stuff. But for now, we've only got 3 games to work with. The things that have become abundantly obvious: Knicks Cavs is the matchup on the mind of the league this year, as far as the matchup to highlight in the East. And MLK Day for MSG Network is apparently no more, which is kind of sad. But anyway, let's get back in. I want to give just a roundabout update on the Knicks assistant coaching search and what they've managed to do in the last week or so, because we haven't really provided any updates on that because it's just been, I mean, look, it's not exactly groundbreaking news, if I'm being honest, but it's still worth reporting on. And then we will throw it to Gavin and Danny Cunningham for the final segment when we get back in to hear some more thoughts on Knicks-Cavs, which apparently is a very important matchup this season. So lots more to come on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to let you all know about our friends over at Gametime. And we've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. And that's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last minute deals. And I'm thinking about doing that myself, actually. I've done a poor job of seeing a show that I want to see this year. I want to see the My Chemical Romance tour that they're on right now. And my wife and I, we just haven't been able to make it work with our schedule. We had to miss their MetLife date, and I had some friends that went to that and they said it was awesome. So that was a little annoying. So now I've got some serious FOMO, and now I'm like, they're playing Philly this weekend, which I might be able to make on Friday, or they're playing Boston in a few weeks. I might actually make a trip up to Boston and go see them there because I've never been to Fenway Park, and that sounds kind of fun. And I'm going to be getting those tickets off Gametime because those things have been sold out for a long time, and I did not buy them ahead of time, clearly. So I will be checking out some zone deals on Gametime and making sure that I get my right seat in a good section, especially because I'll be going to a stadium that I've never been to before. So definitely going to be using Gametime and getting those reps in soon. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, let's keep talking about some of the recent Knicks news here. We got some updates on the assistant coaching search that have come out scattered over the last week or so. It's been there's honestly, none of these are worth doing a show on by themselves. It's assistant coaches. So we've kind of just let these pile up to report all at once here. So first off, we'll do these in order of when they were reported. So last week, Ian Begley says source confirms Brendan O'Connor and the Knicks are closing in on a deal to add O'Connor as a top assistant on Mike Brown's staff. O'Connor has a strong defensive acumen and has worked for the Clippers under both Ty Lue and Doc Rivers. He'll be top assistant on defense. The Knicks are still looking to fill another top spot on Brown's staff. Well, spoiler alert, they did that already. Noted that Stephen Bondi of the New York Post was first on the O'Connor defensive assistant note there. So this one is probably the one that I have the strongest opinion on out of these three guys I'm about to mention, but I think adding Brendan O'Connor makes a lot of sense. He comes from the Clippers last season. I think that if you could poach someone from the Clippers and want them to be focused on your defense, that's a great idea. I think Jeff Van Gundy's been given a lot of credit for what they were able to do defensively last season, and probably rightfully so. But anyone you can get off of that staff that interviews well and seems to have good ideas about coaching and defense, I say you go for it. I mean, the Clips were a top 3 team in terms of points per 100 possessions last year. They on defense, I should say, they led a lot of the defensive metrics. Like they were one of the best defensive teams in basketball last year. The fact that you can have a team with James Harden as one of your primary players and be a top defensive team in 2025, I think that says a lot as far as if you want to poach people from that coaching staff. Obviously that's not taking anything away from like Kawhi Leonard or if it's a Zubats or anything like that, who have both been phenomenal. But, I think if you take a guy that was in that environment and then say, hey, now you have Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson to work with, and Deuce McBride, and whoever else, the Knicks maybe add on their final spot. I mean, there might be something to be said for I know we keep bringing him up, but he keeps being listed as one of the top targets, but like Ben Simmons was on the Clippers last year and put together a pretty good like 15 game stretch and a decent little stretch in the playoffs where he only played I think a handful of minutes per game, like 8 minutes a game, but was an overall positive in the playoffs. So someone that has experience with him, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good hire. And again, it's not like I know exactly what he was doing in every practice. I don't know if anyone does, how responsible he was for the Clippers defense, but he was at least around a really good defense, and you love to see that. So I think that's a good hire for the Knicks. I mean, spoiler, I kind of think all these are fine hires. I think if they vetted them well enough, I think why question it when it comes to assistant coaches. But we got another hire that was reported by Shams first. He said Charlotte Hornets assistant Chris Gent is finalizing a deal to become the associate head coach of the New York Knicks under Mike Brown. Sources tell ESPN. New York and Tyler Glass of CSE Talent negotiated terms, blah, blah, blah. He returns to the Knicks where he spent 96-97 as a player. Then Ian Begley also noted that O'Connor and Gent will lead the defense and offense respectively. Brown worked with Gent in Cleveland, and then Gent is now getting a promotion to associate head coach instead of just an assistant. And then also that officially meant that Pablo Prigioni withdrew himself, and Mike Weiner from Indiana withdrew himself as well. So they both withdrew themselves from consideration. So they get Chris Gent as their effectively offensive assistant coach. And I mean, look, I'm not gonna again, I think it's foolish to assign all or anything of anything from a team to an assistant coach, but the offense doesn't really stand out at any of his most recent stops. But it's a little hard to argue that like the Lakers in 22-23 or 22-23-24, or the Hornets in 24-25, where he spent last season, were really in like a position to succeed, where you would think, oh, those were going to be offensive juggernauts. Like those two particular years for the Lakers, it was kind of just LeBron and AD and sort of a skeleton crew. I mean, now it's LeBron and Luca and a little less of a skeleton crew. They've done a pretty good job of building that roster out as best they can. But it was like I don't think anyone expected that to be like the offensive powerhouse in the league or anything like that. And then the Hornets are just kind of a mess. Let's be honest. I mean, they've dealt with injuries and just overall talent deficit on that team. Had a new head coach last year as well, and clearly the goal was not really to win, at least not in my opinion. So, yeah, it's hard to hold any of that against him. But you figure if he interviewed well, then that's good enough for me. So let's talk about the last hire here. So this just came out a couple days ago. Ian Begley reports that the Knicks are hiring TJ Saint as an assistant coach on Mike Brown's staff. League sources told SNY. Saint, head coach of the Pelicans G League team, will aid the Knicks on the offensive end. He's viewed in NBA circles as a bright offensive mind. The Squadron, which is the Pelicans G League team, had G League's top offense in the 23-24 regular season. And in addition to coaching with the Pelicans, Saint is coached at University of Georgia, with the Pistons, at Butler University, and at Belmont University. So I looked a little bit into the Squadron, the Pels G League team. Last year, not as good. 12-22 record last year, -4 net rating, and about a 108 offensive rating, which was near the bottom of the G League last year. But did have a 117.2 offensive rating in 23-24, like Ian noted, but still overall a negative net rating in 23-24. So they were giving up, I think it was like 118.6 or something like that in defensive rating. So it's like a -1.4 net rating there. So that said, if you look at the rosters for the Pels G League team, the Squadron, the last couple of years, not exactly chock full of NBA talent. I mean, they had a couple guys stop over there this past year before going up to the big club. Elfrid Payton, most notably, who made his return to the bigs last year with the Pelicans. So, you know, yeah, I again, it's hard to really like ascribe too much to a guy who was just coaching the G League team. I mean, I know that there are some coaches that do just make water out of, or turn water into wine at the G League level and have teams that are, you know, greater than the sum of their parts that go on to win championships or whatever. I don't know that he necessarily was doing that, but if ultimately if he came into his interview and showed some great offensive schemes and impressed the Knicks brass and impressed Mike Brown, then I'm good with it. And I will say I do like that the Knicks are I appreciate that they got Brendan O'Connor to kind of lead the defense, but I like that with Brown, with Gent, and now with Saint, and then with some of the guys that they kept on the staff, that they seem to be focusing on the offense. I think that given the personnel on this team, you're gonna want to be a creative offense first team that can do enough on defense to get by. But I think that, I mean, the Knicks were one of the top offenses in the NBA. I think they were number 2 just behind Cleveland for the first like 2 months of last year before kind of falling off a cliff and getting less creative with how they were scheming things. I think the goal this year should be, come out and be the most innovative offensive team in the league. Use all these really talented pieces that you have on the team. You're adding Jordan Clarkson now, who's a really versatile offensive player, like a really good scoring guard, better passer, I think, than he gets credit for. You're adding Yabu, who's a really versatile player on both ends. Like, go out there and figure out a way to turn this into the one of the top offenses in the league. I think that's clearly their goal, and hopefully they've done a good job of getting there so far. So that's all the coaching updates. Like I said, it's not like I have in-depth thoughts on this really, because how much can you really glean from what these guys were able to do as assistants? It's like they you hope that they interviewed well and that they have great ideas and that Mike Brown is excited to work with them rather than have them work under him. I think that will be a big difference potentially in the Mike Brown staff versus the Tibbs staff. So we'll see. But right now, I feel like I like where the Knicks' priorities are. But anyway, I think that's it for my portion of this episode. So we're going to take a quick second and then come back in, and you'll hear from Gavin and Danny Cunningham again, finishing up their conversation from yesterday about Knicks-Cavs. So for me, thanks for listening. Talk to you guys soon and enjoy that live.
All right, let's get into the Cavs a little bit. Danny, I haven't got a chance to. I texted a little bit. We haven't talked in depth about the feeling in Cleveland coming out of that playoff run, and I imagine it's of two schools of thought, and it's probably very similar to how the Knicks felt coming off that 23-24 season where they lose to the Pacers in the semifinals, and yet half their team was injured, and there was just this lingering feeling of like, God damn it, man. If they were just even forget about fully healthy, forget about Julius Randle. If they just had some of their depth, if they had, I always forget my Bogdanovich, but it was Bojan Bogdanovich. If they had a fully healthy OG Anunoby who only played 2 games in that series, they would have beaten Indiana. Maybe they could have challenged the Boston Celtics. And I'm sure there were some lingering feelings of that in Cleveland. And yet there are also some doubts, right? You come off a 64-win season. You have this ridiculously dominant team. And again, for the third time in 4 years, not quite able to build off that in the playoffs. And I think we're my question center, because I really do still like their depth around that big four, plus 9.3 in over 1,600 possessions in the regular season. Unquestionably amazing number. In the playoffs, minus 13 in just 154 possessions. You put a major asterisk on that because obviously Darius Garland was not himself. I know Donovan Mitchell was playing hurt. I remember Evan Mobley was also hurt to some extent. And Jared Allen, we can talk about, but I guess I say all this to say, do you still believe in Cleveland's big four as a championship big four, or do you think a move has to be made there?
So I don't view it as a big four. And this has been one of the things that I've talked about this summer, really since that Pacers series. I don't think Jared Allen should be considered a core player. I think he's a very good player. I think that, in the right year, and we've seen him do this, he's been an all-star before. The right year, he can be an all-star center in the Eastern Conference. He's a really good player. I think a lot of teams would want to have Jared Allen. I'm not sure that Jared Allen is a 16-game player. I'm positive he's a really good 82-game player. If you can have that guy in your roster from October until April, you're going to be pretty happy because he's going to do a lot of really good things. But April, May, and June, I just have kind of seen the opposite where after that series against the Knicks, he had the quote where maybe the lights were a little bit brighter than expected. That seems to make the rounds every single summer,
I
whether
bring it
it's
up a
about the
lot.
Cavs or
I'm
somebody
guilty.
else. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a quote that will live on forever, and credit to him for making that imprint there. But I think he's a really good regular season player. And I also look at it and say, I think it's harder to thrive with two guys that are both, 6'11", 7 feet tall, playing similar positions than it is two guards, because of how you can kind of not be heliocentric and how you can move the basketball, and that you can create so much different for guys that are ball handling type guys as opposed to bigs. And I think that Evan Mobley, we're going to see him more as a ball handler this year, but no one's going to confuse him with a point guard by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's easier to play that style than it is having maybe two bigs and one small guy, the way that some people do want the Cavs to lean into. So I look at this as the Cavs have a big three. Evan Mobley's not going anywhere. I think that he's going to be somebody that is going to make multiple first team All NBAs. I don't think he's ever going to win an MVP award, but I think he's going to have some top 5 finishes as an MVP type of guy in his career. He already won Defensive Player of the Year. He was second team All NBA last year. I think Donovan Mitchell is no doubt a top 10 player in basketball, and he has been that the entire time he's been in Cleveland when he's been healthy. I think it's fair to have questions about Darius Garland's health, but if you look at what he did in really until that New York game, that right after the All-Star break, I believe it was the one the Cavs won by like 35 points.
Yeah.
He got injured in that one. And after that, he was just not the same player, and obviously had the toe injury that he needed surgery on after the postseason was done, and will probably miss the start of the regular season because of it. I look at those three guys and say, can you win a championship with those three guys being key contributors? I think the answer is yes. Now, if Jared Allen's your fourth best player, you're in a really, really good spot. But I also don't look at him as a core player. I think he's a high-end role player, and you need those guys, but I don't think he's part of the core.
I guess given that answer, what does that practically change for Cleveland? Does that mean, hey, move off Jared Allen, try and add some wing depth, play Evan Mobley as a center? Does that mean you don't close games with him, you just close games with Mobley at the 5? Or does it just change like shot distribution, perception? Like, I'm curious the practical impact of that in your mind.
So I do think, and Kenny Atkinson showed during the regular season that he was willing to do this last year. But I think it means you have to be comfortable not closing games with Jared Allen at center. Like, he can't necessarily be somebody that, despite being a one-time All-Star and somebody that I think was right on the cusp of being an All-Star last year, he can't be treated the way that a typical All-Star would be treated in terms of those closing minutes. Like, yeah, you still start him, but I do think that in the deeper into Evan Mobley's career, we've seen Evan play a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more at center every year. And I think the Cavs are a better team when Evan Mobley plays center than they are when he plays power forward. So I do think, and they were willing to do this in the regular season, and we didn't really see this in the postseason, largely because of the injuries. Like, Evan Mobley missed a game. DeAndre Hunter missed a game in the playoffs. Darius Garland obviously missed the first 2 games. So like, they're closing in the Miami Heat series. Like, they won that. They didn't have a closing lineup in that series because they won every game. It felt like by 50 points against the Heat in that first round. So we really didn't see whether or not he would have been able to do it in the postseason, but he did do it in the regular season. And I think that was something that could have been needed in the postseason. So I do think it's handling things like that. But I think that ultimately, and Jarrett signed a contract extension a little over a year ago at this point. And he is on the final year of the original deal he signed with Cleveland, which was 5 years, $100 million. It was just $20 million a year. It did not move. It was flat for all 5 years. His new contract extension has a raise in it. He's going to be making $28 million a year from now. So I do think at some point the Cavs are going to have to make a financially motivated move. And Jared Allen, considering Evan Mobley plays very similar spot to him, I think Jared Allen is the guy that should be looked at as the first one to potentially, I'm not saying right now, I'm not saying at the trade deadline this year, but at some point when the Cavs have to break up this core 4, Jared Allen's the guy that I think should go.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think just having a little bit more fluidity, maybe that's not the right word, but we saw it on the Knicks side when they started playing Mitchell Robinson and Karl-Anthony Towns together, and it's not a great comparison because Mobley and Allen are just so much more, no pun intended, mobile than those two. I mean, maybe not Mitch, but certainly Cat defensively, yeah. and Jared Allen is just a far more versatile offensive player than Mitchell Robinson. But I just think when you play a team like the Indiana Pacers, it is just physically difficult to keep two guys that tall on the basketball floor. Unless like if it was Mobley and Giannis, you could make it work, but they need to both be like 98th percentile athletes or higher for that to click. And then offensively, and again, in the regular season, this was an issue because give Kenny Atkinson credit. Like he implemented just this incredible like ball movement, this flow to their offense, like where it worked. And Jared Allen is smart enough and skilled enough to make that click. But again, in the playoffs, the margins are so thin. It is difficult to thrive when you don't have like, I mean, ideally 5 like the Pacers, but at least 4 guys that are incredibly comfortable handling the ball in the perimeter. And depending on how Evan Mobley develops, maybe he gets so good at that like it covers that and you're fine with Jared Allen out there. But I'm with you. I think Cleveland is scarier with Evan Mobley playing the 5, maybe DeAndre Hunter in at the 4. I don't know who the 5th guy is, maybe Lonzo Ball, maybe Max Strus. Like I'm curious to see how they structure that. And it could be as simple as like they continue to really lean into Jared Allen. But what's your biggest fear right now for Cleveland next year? That's my version of the floor question, I guess.
I think it's health. I think that this team has so much talent. I still think that they have a lot of depth. Like I look at them and they're going to win a lot of regular season games because they've got, a guy in Donovan Mitchell who I still think is maybe even getting better. Like I think that this year might be like his apex. And then maybe he stops getting better, but he is a much better basketball player now than when the Cavs acquired him a few summers ago. I think Darius Garland is still getting better. I think Evan Mobley is still getting much, much better. If those guys are healthy, I don't see a team in the East other than the Knicks that can beat them in the playoffs. If they're not healthy, they can have what happened to them last year happen. And that's not to take anything away from Indiana, but the Cavs were the more talented team on paper. It's just their guys were not healthy, and the Indiana Pacers played a style that really picked at all of the weaknesses the Cavs have. I think that what they did this year, they tried to take, or this summer, I should say, they tried to take away some of those weaknesses. But if you look at the history of some of their key guys, like Darius Garland, who had to have that toe surgery, the year before he broke his jaw, and basically it was a lost season for him. The year before that, he made an All-Star game before Donovan Mitchell arrived, but he has dealt with some significant injuries throughout his career. It's been very rare. I think the series against the Knicks, really the only postseason that he's been healthy for. So that's an issue. Donovan Mitchell, who played through some calf issues very clearly, despite the fact that he was doing everything he could to try and will the Cavs to wins against the Pacers, he was not the same guy at the end of that series. The year before, he missed the final, I think it was 2 games against the Boston Celtics in their second round series because of a calf injury. So he's had some injury issues. Evan Mobley turning his ankle and missing a game, like that just kind of happens. I don't look at that as some injury question, but these guys have not been able to stay healthy for a postseason run. It's not like Joel Embiid, Philadelphia 76ers level health issues, but I look at it and say, if this team is healthy in the postseason, it's hard for me to see anyone other than the Knicks beating them. If they're not healthy, anything's on the table though.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right.
At least in these, like if they get to the finals, I'm not saying like they need to not be like the Thunder could beat them, the Rockets could beat them, but like in the Eastern Conference, that's how I feel.
All right, last one for me. I think in the regulars, coming off the regular season last year, because we talked a bunch heading into the playoffs throughout the season. Credit to you, love these crossovers. Obviously, Cleveland beat the Knicks 4 times last year. We referenced Game 2, I think, right after the All-Star break, 142-105 Cleveland. That was a low point on the season for the New York Knicks. That April 2nd game, even though Jalen Brunson didn't play, was also kind of a low point. They lose by 19. Game 4. I keep correcting myself here, but maybe that was the most demoralizing because Cleveland was without Donovan Mitchell. I think Evan Mobley didn't play. I think Jared Allen did. I don't quite remember. I should have looked ahead of time. That's on me. Knicks still find a way to lose that game. Darius Garland down the stretch, hunch Jalen Brunson repeatedly. 2-man game with Max Strus, 3-3-3. The Knicks somehow find a way to even lose that one. And it just felt like Cleveland had New York's number. And now coming into next year, that's a race because to your point, Cleveland loses to Indiana. The Knicks prove something by, I think, beating, in my opinion, the best team in the East last year, the Boston Celtics, or at least the scariest one in the playoffs. Cleveland was better in the regular season. Has your, I don't know if this is the right word, but fear, respect for the New York Knicks changed? And I think maybe it did based on the fact that you said the Knicks are the one team that could potentially beat them. But do you see that as a toss-up series, or when push comes to shove, even with a new coach, even with a little more depth, do you think Cleveland has some decisive advantages there and would clearly be the favorites in a 7-game series between the two teams?
I think the Cavs would be the favorites. I don't think it would be like some decisive favorite. Like I don't think that I think the margin is pretty slim, but I do think that the Cavs would be like if right now, if the Eastern Conference Finals started and both teams are completely healthy, which of course never happens because these guys all play 82 games and then go through 2 other rounds of the postseason. But I would imagine that FanDuel would make the Cavs the favorites at the start of that series. Now, that doesn't mean that the Knicks are not capable of winning that series. And I do think that the Knicks earned a lot of respect with the postseason run that they had, because going into that postseason, I personally counted the Knicks out. I didn't think they could beat the Boston Celtics. I didn't think if both teams got to the conference finals, they could beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, because in the regular season against the Cavs, the Celtics, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think the 3 teams that really in the regular season were a cut above everybody else, New York went 0-10 in those games. And I think that colored a lot of the reason why I felt the way about the New York Knicks, because I saw them go against the best teams in the regular season and it went poorly for them every single time, whether it was a blowout win like the Cavs had or a come from behind win like the Cavs had at the end of the season. But it felt like we had seen that story. So to see them flip that script against the Boston Celtics, and that's really where I think they earned a lot of respect. Like I do think from a matchup perspective, Indiana was just a bad fit against the New York Knicks. Like especially after watching the Pacers up close for those 5 games, I went into that thinking like the Knicks have earned a lot of respect from me, but I'm picking Indiana because I just don't see how they can keep up with the Pacers for 7 games. And that proved to be true. But I do think that they earned a lot of respect from I think a lot of Cavs fans and really a lot of fans across the NBA for the way they were able to beat the Boston Celtics, even if Jason Tatum got hurt, even if there were some other injuries they were dealing with. I think they earned a lot of respect there.
Yeah, I think I would have the series pretty close to a toss-up. And to be clear, I think Cleveland is decisively a better regular season team. And I would again, pending significant injuries, I'd be pretty shocked if the Knicks end up winning more regular season games. I do think, and we've sort of been dancing around this the whole conversation, I do think there is a mental fortitude and mettle with the Knicks, and we're going to see, maybe they lose some of that without Tom Thibodeau. That was something he certainly brought to the table. But I think emanating from Jalen Brunson that Cleveland still has to show. I think Donovan Mitchell's that guy. I'm with you. I think he can do a lot of the same things as Jalen, and they're even though their games are different, they're very similar in terms of just how spectacularly talented they are. I want to see it from the rest of Cleveland's roster. Still, I think Evan Mobley showed you some of that. I think some of the role guys in different moments showed you some of that. I'm curious to see it play out for Cleveland, and I do think the depth gap between the two teams has been somewhat mitigated by the offseason. But you know what? We still have to see the games play out. A whole bunch of them. Danny Cunningham, thank you so much for coming on Locked On Knicks. For Knicks fans, because there's so much we didn't get into. The addition of Lonzo Ball, what types of lineups Cleveland is going to lean into next year, maybe even more on the Jared Allen stuff. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Cavs wherever you can find podcasts. Hopefully Cavs fans feel the same way, and check us out over on Locked On Knicks. But until next time, he's Danny. I'm Gavin. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Cavs and Locked On Knicks.